I was 3 and 4 years old when my parents went to Canada first to learn French, and then they went to Africa. And I really don't remember much of it. And so I try to comfort families who are going abroad and who feel like they're just ripping their kids' lives apart by going, and their kids are 2 and 3, 4 years old. And I try to comfort them and tell them they probably really won't remember that when they're my age.
I think we've been talking about it for so long. Like it's been um, such a big chunk of our life. Like as long as I can remember, we were on deputation, traveling from church to church, saying we're going to Africa, we're going to Africa, and everybody had been asking me, "What are you going to do when you get to Africa? What's it going to be like when you get to Africa?" I had no clue. I'm like a 7-year-old. I'm like, "Oh, I'll live in a hut or something like that."
I don't remember having any really, really strong emotions about the transition, either positive or negative. Mostly just excitement because we're going to Africa, and it's a big deal. It's kind of like a big adventure, and we had been building up to that for the past 4 years with deputation.
And then I don't know, it's a quick transition for me. I felt like I've went from being in America and playing with friends to being Africa and playing with friends and doing what you do and running around. It was exciting, learning all the new things, and we were living in the jungle at the time, so the rainforest and the rain and meeting all the new kids and stuff. But it wasn't like, whoa, this is different or weird. It was just a new and exciting experience, just like Canada was a new and exciting experience.
My husband made a trip to survey the place where we were going to move. We kind of stayed with some people for 5 months, but we were looking to move to another area. So he traveled up to the area. It was in the Sahara, the sub-Sahara, and nobody went with him. And it was in a foreign language. Nobody had ever been there before. We had never been there before. And he went up there and spent a week, and he came back. And he said, when he came back, we can't do this. He said, I'm going to call and tell the office that we can't do this. And so I said, calm down, because I had not gone. He went by himself. I said, just calm down. Let's just pray about it and think about it. And after a few days, he thought, well, maybe we can do this. And we did do that.
And then one of the really big transitions was going from the jungle, the mission center where we were at, to the desert up north. That was actually one of the harder transitions because I kind of felt like I had friends and roots, and the culture was something that you could assimilate easily into to going up north, whereas desert, the religion was drastically different, and just because of the very, very low education level, I never really felt like we bonded with any kids there our own age. Like there was nothing that we could have any, I don't know what do you say, like there was no common ground to be friends with. So I think the difficulty of that transition was more about having friends and people to interact with. And that wasn't going from America to Africa. That was actually transitioning from one part of Africa to the other part up north, where the culture and the religion made it difficult.
Some of the things that happened to us those first 5 months were frightening. We had illnesses, and we had never dealt with African hospitals and African doctors. That was terribly frightening. But God was with us and helped us. And we had many cultural experiences. One of my boys, in playing with the other children, went and cut down a tree, which is not a big deal in the woods in the United States. You can cut down a little sapling. But we found out later that it was somebody's cocoa plantation, and he had cut down their cocoa tree, and that was a big deal. So we got in trouble for that. But things like that, we just learned. And I guess the overall is enduring hardness. After 4 years in West Africa, we went back to the United States for a furlough. We had been in a village without radio, without TV, without lights, without running water. So you can imagine what an adjustment it was after 4 years of that to go back to the United States and all that's in the United States. We were very excited about it and anticipated a good time, but I didn't anticipate how difficult it would be for us to go back and live what we considered was a normal life and what the children, some of them, had totally forgotten. I was determined that they were going to experience everything in America that I had experienced as a child, and I didn't want them to miss anything. So probably my first furlough was a whirlwind of activities for my children. I tried to sign my boys up for Boy Scouts. I went in and said, "Can my son be a Boy Scout?" And they told me, "No, he has to come up through the ranks, and we just can't take somebody randomly." Well, of course, immediately I started crying, and that my little boy wasn't going to get to be a Boy Scout or experience what it was like to be a Boy Scout. So they let him in the Boy Scouts. And my little girl, I wanted her to have a real birthday party. So I invited all the little girls of the church to her birthday party, and it was utter chaos. The girls were very bad, and I don't remember any of us having a happy time. I felt badly that they still couldn't live what I considered a normal life. We did traveling most of the year that we were home. We were a lot on the road. So we were still homeschooling, but now we were homeschooling in different homes and different churches. I guess I fought with my children are never going to have a normal life. And I tried to make it as normal as I could. And so it wasn't normal. But that's what made them who they are now. And I think they turned out all right.
I came back to the States in 2008 to start college, and I remember that I had it pretty easy compared to my brothers because I had four brothers who came back to the States ahead of me and had completed their education, and now I was coming through, so I had a bunch of support. So I'm pretty sure in comparison, I had it a lot better than they did. They knew all the experiences. They had relayed the information back to me, and I thought I was ready for it, but I really wasn't. Which college student is? I do remember in Africa that starting around probably their age of 14, I had nightmares like every night. Night was not a fun time for me. Like every single night, I had nightmares and just was constantly afraid of I don't know what. When I came back to America at 18, it changed very quickly. It was a very sudden change, a very drastic change. It went from being nightmares at night to I went into like a deep depression, and I couldn't wait to go to sleep at night. Like night was my friend. If I could make it through the day, I could sleep, and I knew if I could sleep, I could reset and be okay the next day. That was kind of my defining life for several years coming back was just the depression. Um, I didn't know how to live in America. I didn't have any friends. I had no idea how to function in this country. I didn't desire to. I hated it. I didn't even try. Um, like 18 is supposed to be really fun. You go to college, you do all these new things. I didn't want to do anything different. I didn't want to learn anything new. I remember one of the most exciting times when I got back was when I had a driver's license. I forget how I got it. I think I got it when I was 16. I'd never driven though at all, hardly. I drove to the gas station and I filled up the car with gas, and that was an incredibly exciting experience for me that I had managed to do that. Other exciting experiences they were defining was going to Walmart and buying food, figuring out how to do that. Mostly I came back with Hot Pockets and hot dogs and marshmallows. I don't know what else I ate. I don't think very much. But that was exciting, and that was about as adventurous as I could think. When I was in Africa, my adventure was let's travel across the Sahara Desert. Let's take a 2 week trip by myself and travel by bush taxi. Took different adventures, like take my bicycle and just ride all day through the desert. When I got to America, my adventure was do I have enough energy after work to make it to Walmart and get home? And that was exciting.
I registered at the Christian University and started classes there. And I didn't do well. I didn't do well academically, and I wasn't doing well spiritually. And I think that's kind of the main thing I wanted to emphasize is when I left Cameroon, I had a big unresolved spiritual problem, and I knew it. And when I came to America, I still had the big unresolved spiritual problem, and it affected like pretty much every area of my life. I didn't know how to function socially. I didn't know how to make friends. I didn't know how to study or do homework. So my grades in school were awful, and I was missing assignments. I wasn't doing homework. I was just reading books in my dorm room like I had done back in Cameroon. And there were people who wanted to help me and tried to help me, but I didn't, I guess I didn't know them very well. And so maybe there was a lack of trust there. And there was also this sense that their acceptance of me or their help was predicated on my being in a good spiritual condition. And so I thought, well, I have all these spiritual problems. These people aren't really going to want to help me.
The main thing that I think was difficult, one of the main things that was difficult for me was telling stories, choosing whether or not to tell stories about growing up abroad. And that was my past. That's all I knew. And so when I came back and would hold conversations with friends, that's all I had to talk about. And so it took me about 3 or 4 years to where I got enough experiences here in the United States that I could get into a conversation and out of a conversation without somebody finding out that I had that I grew up abroad. And I felt like that was quite an accomplishment, and I was pleased to be able to get there. And not that I was embarrassed of my past, I just thought it was very private. That if somebody didn't understand it or didn't wasn't truly interested in knowing about it, I really didn't want to talk about it because I felt like those experiences and memories were very personal to me.
I remember getting emails a lot from mom and daddy. How are you doing? What can we do to help? My response was always, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine." That was never anything more than that. I think they asked youth pastors to check in on me, other people to check on me. Anybody who came to me got the same response. Yeah, I'm fine, doing great, no problems, don't need anything. The only people I would even come close to opening up with was siblings and other MKs who I felt safe with.
I do remember particularly that for whatever reason, I bonded with the MKs on this campus I went to, like almost instantaneously. And so Ben and Ryan were my friends, and we stuck together like glue. And we did a lot of things together. I'd say out of the 7 days in the week, we'd spend at least 5 together doing meals. We wouldn't study together. That never worked, which is very normal. We would do activities together. We'd go bike riding. We would go watch movies together. We'd hang out in our rooms at night, and we would just generally create mayhem wherever we went because we were always so loud. We were still learning how to be quieter in this society. I think the hardest thing for me was adapting to the American people because they're always talking about sports and movies. And I remember I didn't like that, and I actually hated it. But that was the wrong attitude to have because it doesn't matter where you go in the world, you're going to be in situations where people talk about different things, and I had to learn to adapt to it.
When I first came back to America, the last thing I wanted to do was live in America. Whatever path could take me out of America was the one I would take. I saw if I finished college, I'd have a better job of getting better chance of getting a job outside America. So that's what I did. I went to college for the sole purpose of getting out of America. Somewhere along the way, I started playing ultimate frisbee with some friends, and not the sport, but the people in the sport helped me to find something about America that I liked. The culture of ultimate is very close, tight knit. It's a family, and I found a kind of like these people that I finally had common ground with. I still hadn't watched the same movies. I still hadn't had the same experiences. I still hadn't gone to the same schools. And so then I finally found a common ground and I could actually be real with these people. I didn't learn the language. I learned the culture and then I could speak the language. I learned that trying to speak the language is hypocritical and it doesn't make you a real person. So learning the language to talk about movies or learning the language to talk about cars or learning whatever language, spiritual language, church language, didn't really make you part of that culture. You have to be in the culture. So I found ultimate culture and that became my language. And I started going to a church called Sunpoint and helping out. And it was the kind of place where I could actually fit in, and they spoke my language and I spoke their language. We had the same culture. The pastor is African. The church was in the slums or the lower district of Greenville. They had Hispanics, they had African Americans, they had older middle class white people. They had every spectrum of class you could probably think of in this church, but all of them were going towards the same goal. They wanted to minister to the kids that we brought in on this ministry. And when I don't remember if there was a specific time, but when I started going to this church and I started helping at this church, I think that's when I finally lost my depression. Like I don't remember having any more days where I just fought all day just to get to my sleep. I actually started, I don't know, enjoying things, enjoying people.
And then the second thing would probably be like my church. I remember I had a great church and a really, really good pastor. Even today, I attend the same church. And I remember the pastor really looked out for me because he and my dad had been friends going through seminary. And I just remember that he always looked out for us on Sundays or whenever he would pass us on the sidewalk. He would ask how things were going. I remember that really encouraged me because I knew that someone from my church cared. And then the third thing would probably be like just having friends and family. I remember it was just great knowing that on the holidays we had a place to go to. My aunt and uncle had a house on the lake, and so we would go to the lake and we would ride a pontoon boat. We would fish. We would have meals together. I remember that was really important. Being able to integrate back in the States was having family to take care of us and us to try to be a help to them.
And the other thing is still making friends. When I first came back, I really did struggle to understand my peers, to make relationships with them, and I've thought about that a lot in the past year or two. I think I finally understood that I didn't grow up with my peers except for my siblings, and so relationships today are still take more work, and I have some really great relationships with my peers, but those take more work than ones um, with friends who are 10 or 15 years my senior. And I really think that's because that's the way I grew up, and the people I grew up around were 10 or 15 years older than me. So when I came back to the States, those were the ones that were the easiest to make, and the hardest were my peers, to form relationships with them and keep up with them and understand them.